Should we go over, does anyone have any questions about the previous homework?
You mean homework 4?
Homework 3. Yeah, the homework. It's like the changing scatter plot, staircase, random subset homework.
Yeah, the animation had the line going like that, so I couldn't do that. How to do that?
Oh, you do an animation for the line.
Yeah. So by default, the animation was just popping up, or maybe just creating the video. It's just depending on where I put the animation, but I couldn't control how to do this.
The drawing.
Yeah.
Make that way.
You can do it at the end. I can correct and show the.
Yeah, do you want to?
We can do it at the end.
Oh, all
Yeah.
yeah, no problem.
Because, yeah, let's just go through this first.
Yeah.
Okay. We can come back.
Okay, so hold that thought.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it. But yeah.
Yeah, if there is anything else regarding homework, like last homework, so like just let me know so we can discuss that at the end of this session.
So. Okay, so I'm just gonna post. We made a little code pen today, so we can have a little interactive lab session. So I'm just gonna post that right here. Okay, so if everyone has their computers, looks like it, you can navigate to that and follow along. And it's also helpful to just, you can fork it, make your own code pen and change a bunch of stuff on it. So, we'll jump into it. For those of you that were at the math lecture, we're using the UFO data again, I'm just running with that. But we're going to create a map, draw this map up, like the choropleth that we saw in the example in the lecture. We're going to color it based off of our data, but before we do that, we're going to map our UFO data to our states. So, okay, so jumping into it, basically we're loading the map data in, and it looks like, just switch the console here. Okay. So you guys probably remember we have a GeoJSON file that has all of our states in there. Just gonna comment that out so you can see it. So it looks like might be a little too large for the console and code pen, but okay, so we have a GeoJSON. You know what I could do is I could just show the code example that I have.
VS Code.
Yeah, in VS Code. Okay, so you can still follow along because it's the same.
Can you just copy the JavaScript, like all the files there, so you
Yeah.
get access to it?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm just going to show you on a larger screen here because it's a little hard on computer.
This is your example.
No, this is oh.
I think it has two items.
That's
Yeah, it has two items. It's fine.
is it? That's so weird. We can change that. Sorry, guys. Gotta look at it through here. Okay, so we have the whole screen to work with here. Okay, so we have our map data. We have our GeoJSON format. It has our feature array with all of our states. With those features, we have a property, but the only property we have right now, well, pretend that the only property we have right now is name. We want to map the UFO data that we have to it. So we can take a look at this UFO data here. So we've seen this before. Does anyone have any questions about that? Maybe wasn't in lecture about that GeoJSON format. No? Okay. Say what?
Can you increase the font size?
Yeah.
Maybe just maximize the window.
You are using VS Code,
Yeah.
command speech.
Okay. But okay, is that a little better back there? Okay, cool. So we have our map data. Comment this out. We have our UFO data, and it looks like this. It's just a CSV file that we've loaded in here. It's an array. We have 58 of them. What I've done is I've loaded in the UFO data. I'm filtering on the country. You guys can follow this in the code pen. And so these are all UFO sightings from our data set that are from the US. So you can look through, and the first question you might have, or you maybe should have, is, are there countries that are missing UFO data? Yes, there are. Are there some countries that have multiple UFO sightings? Yes, there are. So we're going to go through, and the first step we're going to do is, you'll notice that the only state information we have on this UFO data is the state abbreviation. And in our map data, if you remember, we have the name property, but we don't have the abbreviation to it. So, okay, so what can we do to map our UFO data to our states? So we can look at that. We have the name, we have the abbreviation on one side. So I was looking at this morning, and I'm like, what is a good way of doing this? There are abbreviations to state names and state names to abbreviations that are like readily available on the internet. So we Googled one of those, and we basically saved a JSON file for what I'm calling a state dictionary. And is anyone not familiar with the dictionary data structure? It's like key value pairs. It's just an easy way to look things up, and it looks like this. Okay, so now we have, for each state name, we can look up the abbreviation. So then we're going to map through our data. Right here. So what we're doing is we're taking our map data, getting into our feature array, and then for each state, I'm just going to console log the state. So now we're iterating through each of those state features. So what are we going to get when we map through and log each of these?
The spelling was wrong.
This is what happens when I try to line code. So what are we going to see? You see these? We want to access the name and the properties, right? So we're going through. State.properties.name, that's going to give us the name, right? That's what we have to look up in our dictionary and compare. So, what if we put this and use that as a key for our dictionary? Okay. So now we're getting entries. We get to undefined. So, this is going to be slightly similar to homework 4. Is there anyone that hasn't started with homework 4, or at least mapping your data? Have you guys all tried, or have you guys all successfully mapped your data to?
How do you deal with that undefined?
Yeah. Okay. So
What do you mean map? Like, did the map
displayed with the correct colors, is that what you're talking about?
So actually looping through, so one thing that you do that you're gonna have to do is you're gonna loop through all of your country data from your maps when you're assigning data to it, right?
Yeah, that was undefined, right? It's what
Yeah, and there's some values that you guys have noticed already that either for population or region, they're gonna come back as undefined. So you can do this in a couple ways. What we did here is I'm using ternary operators. So it would be like an if-then statement. So what I'm going to do here, so we're looping through, we're looking at the abbreviation for this, and that's what this is. And for some reason the format got a little weird. But putting it back so it's a little easier to follow. Are any of you not familiar with this ternary operator syntax? We'll go through it anyway. So basically what I'm doing is I'm checking, okay, is it in the dictionary? If it is in the dictionary, my abbreviation is going to be lowercase. And that's what I'm going to use to filter my state UFO data on. But if it's not in the dictionary, I'm just going to use null as my abbreviation. And when I filter through, if this is null, basically the next step, I have this abbreviation, right? So then I can actually filter, because we have the same abbreviation that we do in our UFO data. So then you can take the entire array of UFO data and you can filter it by asking, okay, is the abbreviation that we have for this current state that we're looping through, does it equal the state parameter in the UFO data, or in any of the rows of the UFO data? Does that make sense to everyone? What we're doing here? So if it's null, it's not going to return anything. It's just going to be an empty array. Yeah, okay. And we can look at that too. Just UFO. Okay. So at least in my work, these are extremely helpful because there's a lot of times you're going to have missing data for stuff. And so coming up with different ways of, okay, how am I going to handle this? We could do either an empty array. We could do null. I usually, if I have missing data, I'll add that parameter anyway, and I'll make the value null or like unknown. And that's just so it's not throwing an error on when I loop through and I'm checking that parameter, the parameter's value. It's not going to be, oh, this parameter is undefined. It's consistent through the entire data set, if that makes sense. So what I'm doing here is, regardless, I'm making this UFO parameter for every state, even though it doesn't have UFO data. And then, because of the way I'm styling it later, I'm just checking whether the array length is 0 or not. But you can think of it as the same way of, instead of checking if the length is 0, you could be, oh, is the value null?
No.
Okay, yeah. Does that make sense? And we can go over a couple more examples later if you guys are having trouble thinking about it in that way for your homework. But we'll go through the rest of the example first. So we're looping through. What we're doing is we're adding that UFOs property to each of the states. So this is either going to be, I know for at least a couple of the states, it's going to be an empty array, but that doesn't matter to us right now. We're just going to map through it and we're going to return the state.
The output of the filter is just an array itself, right?
Yeah.
Of the same length as your US UFO data.
So it's actually going to, what's nice about filter is that instead of, so if you were to map it, it would return the same length as the state UFO data, but you would have like undefined values. But filter actually returns a subset of the array, and it only returns
Matches,
what matches the condition. So yeah, if we'll like save this and just reload this, and you'll see we have the abbreviation that we've looked up, and I'm just switching it to lowercase because that's what's in our UFO data. And then you'll see some of them have 7, and then there's a few that have 0. And so that's what we're actually assigning to the properties to the state data. So then next, you guys have seen this before, selecting the SVG that already exists, and I'm just assigning it like a set 1,000 width, 1,000 height. And then we have this projection that we saw yesterday. We're translating it. This centers our map. Because it's 1,000, we're just doing half of that to center it, and then adding a scale to set the size of it. And this is optional, but it gives you a little more control over the rendering of the map. So then we're actually going to draw, right? So let's just take a look at what we have now. New map data, where we draw it. We're already consoling it before, but I'm just going to look in here. So we have name, UFOs. This happens to be an empty array. So what I'm doing here when I'm rendering is going down to draw map. So I'm passing the SVG and the projection just because I'm using the projection for the markers, and I didn't want to create the projection twice. I'm trying to eliminate redundancy, so I made the projection up here and then passing that as a parameter with our map data. So we create that color scale similar to the example in the lecture. I'm just using a series of grays that are from light to dark, and we're going to encode the length of our UFO arrays for the number of sightings. That would mean the number of sightings in our choropleth map. So we're going to go through, we're going to make our scale for our colors, for our domain, for our colors. So we want the min and max values. So what I'm doing here, I'm taking the map data in its entirety, specifying that I want the features array, and then I'm mapping each of those similar to what we did before. But what I'm doing is I'm just returning the UFO length. So I'm going to get an array that looks like what I'm doing up above here. It looks like this. So now I have basically a flat array of all of our UFO data. And then I can get the min and max values from that. So that's how I'm defining the min and max for the domain, right? And map, I might use map more than anything. I don't know about you, Kieran, but map is extremely useful, especially, and we could maybe talk about that later, flat maps. So if you have nested arrays of things and you want just a flat array of all of the values, you can flat map. And that basically flattens that hierarchical structure of the arrays. So you can use that. So I have to use that sometimes when I'm setting scales for different data depending on how it's formatted. So then we have our path generator, which we saw yesterday, similar to a line generator, specifying that the projection that we want is the one that we passed as a parameter. And then we're actually selecting that group that I drew up here, the map layer, specifying our map data.features to draw our paths. And then after we draw our paths, we're actually styling it. We're passing our fill, we're specifying our fill by that color scale that we made, and then by the length of each UFO array that's associated with the properties of each feature. That makes sense.
Can we slow down here just a little bit? So
Yeah.
I'm still trying to understand the map function, because on our data we have, it's like a population, GDP, all that kind of stuff, right? So like, since I didn't use map, I just did a workaround and just accessed like that region and then just did like JavaScript moves through it, because I couldn't access it, I guess. So this map data, that has everything in it.
Yeah, so if you think about a starting point for the world data, so you have your map data, which is instead of the 50 states, you have like all of the countries. I'm assuming it has all of the countries in it. And you're going to be looping through similar to what we did up here, is that we're taking those features from the map array, and each country in your array should have the geometry information, but then it should also have that properties parameter. And that's where you can start storing more data, is in the properties parameter. And that's similar to, I think in the example yesterday, we had the state name, and then we added additional agricultural data to it. You can think of it as that way, is that, okay, so I have these countries, I'm gonna loop through or map through all of my countries, and map is just like for each. So you're just looping through, it's just iterating through everything, but what's nice about map is that it returns, like you can specify that, oh, do I wanna return this whole node? Or, oh, do I actually wanna return what we're doing here when we're defining the scale? Down here a little better. Is that instead of returning the actual node or the feature, I'm returning just the length of it. That makes sense. And what really helped me understand map better is I console as I go. So you can, I have this inline, but you can break this out, and you can console log like what is n. You're like, okay. So then you can get an idea of, for some reason this example just does that. So it's like, what is m? I'm assuming we're doing m for consoling m. And then you're like, okay, well I actually want to get into the features. And so you're like, okay, so then I'll go through and I'll be like, okay, what is m dot properties? And then you iterate through those, and you're specifying that you're just looping through the properties of all of the nodes. And so to manipulate that, I think the next step would be getting an idea of, okay, so this is the ID for my country, it's a country abbreviation, or it's the actual name of the country. Is there a way that you can check whether that's in your population information or your region information? If that makes sense. Okay. So then you can go through and you can be like, okay, similar to what we did up here, we're just looking for the abbreviation. And I use the state dictionary, and that was just because I didn't have a good way of mapping. I didn't have the whole name, or I didn't have the abbreviation. So I couldn't directly compare or find a state entry in my UFOs because I didn't have the abbreviation for the state. So this is like, you could think of it as, this is like a middle point that you don't necessarily need in your homework, but you do want to go through whatever that unique identifier is that you have in your country. You need to find that in your data. If that makes sense. So like the population, GDP, and double checking if it's not there. I would still create a parameter for it in the node that you make, or the plot data object that you make for the country, but it'll just be null. And then that way you can deal with it down the line. It's not going to be, you're not going to be looking for a parameter that doesn't exist. You can check and see, okay, so does GDP, is that unknown? Cool, we'll just like make the X or the Y 0.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So this is kind of step before plot data, making that plot data object.
Yeah.
So this ABB would be all of my countries, any country that exists, its identifier code.
Yeah. Well, so this ABB, it's a little misleading in this example because we had to take an extra step to grab the abbreviation from our dictionary.
Okay.
So you can think of it more as you're looping through and you're checking whether the country name in whatever data set you're looking at equals the country name that you're iterating through when you're mapping through your data, if that makes sense. And so I guess, yeah, it would be like, if you're looking at like GDP, you could, so we're iterating through each country, we get to Germany. We want to check, okay, is Germany, or we just want to filter the information for Germany from that data set. And we're comparing IDs, or country names. So now that we have these unknown values, or we have an empty array, we have another step here that we can, so instead of works out nicely for this example that we just have an empty array because it'll color it anyway. And I don't know why it's not coloring it right now. But I broke something. I don't know. We're just gonna go pretend like the scale is working and go through this example because this is going to be applicable to what you're doing. So we kind of talked about this yesterday in the lecture, but so you have this value that's unknown and you want to color your circles. Let's say your region. So you're checking to see what the region is for your circle and you hit an unknown. You can use that ternary operator again. So we're trying to fill our country path based off of a given property in the data. Specifically, we're using the UFO link. So we hit an empty one. I basically want to color all of my empty arrays differently than the rest of them. So I'm going through, I'm saying, okay, so if the length equals 0, I want them to be red. Otherwise, I just want to scale it based off of the length of the UFO data. So it's like that. And these should also be colored red. But yeah, does that make sense? Did you see how maybe you could use that for coloring your circles or even the countries based off of that fill data or the region data? So, yeah, okay. So another fun thing. Weird. So the tooltip doesn't work on this one. But I'm wondering.
The quote.
My reading is I didn't copy over the or the if you have it. I just copied
Yes,
it.
I have. I have a date here for the 2 weeks. You can just copy it.
Yeah. So, does that make sense, everyone? For the mapping? A little bit. We can maybe talk about that more. I was going to talk about tooltips.
I'd like to keep talking about that.
Yeah, for mapping? Yeah.
Yeah, so in this assignment, are we doing that mapping inside of update plot? Or do we have to do something outside of that, like find global variable? Basically, I'm confused on that, creating the new plot, or creating a plot data object.
So I would consider iterating through the map and creating that plot data object would be an initial thing that you don't have to do every time. So I wouldn't put that in update data. I would put that in, so once you load the data, you're gonna map through everything and you're gonna create your array of plot data objects. That way, you can just use that array. So when you change your X and Y parameters, or what you want to plot on the X and Y axis, you can just look that up in the plot data. Or you can, you know what I mean? If that makes sense.
So plot data should be made outside of even, maybe at the top of the gap plot, or in the gap plot constructor.
So I wonder if it would be, maybe we should come up with another example of like flow of, I don't think of a good way of like explaining it a little different. Like a good way of, so we have our initial map data. Yeah, to answer your question, I would only do that once. But
Drawing the map.
the initial creation of that plot data array structure. So we have our map data, we map through, we're mapping our values to our map, which sounds kind of weird, but basically the countries.
That would be just work. I mean, you shouldn't have to do it more than once.
Yeah.
you can just initially map your country's data with your actual data, and then you have access to that data all the time.
So we should have multiple, so for each country, we should have a plot data object. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah, for
Each
each country
country should be a plot data object.
should be a plot data object, yes. And then you probably noticed in the example, someone had asked about missing values for an X or Y, if you're choosing that. Some of them do, but you can always account for that by the example that we have in our, like, an image that we have is that we've plotted some of the data, and you'll see a lot of the gray dots on the side, they're like 0 values. That's just because there isn't a value for that country for like GDP, if that makes sense. So they're not plotted. They're just treated as like 0 values, and that's okay. Or someone had asked if they can filter those out. You can. You can do that as well. It just if I were going to do it, I would just make them 0 values. But if you would prefer to just filter out any of the countries that have 0 values for X and Y, you can do that as well. I wonder if it might be more beneficial, we'll just finish this demo, just touch on the last part of it, and then we could do more of a open question, kind of go through and look at people's code, if that makes sense, like an office hour. If that makes sense. Yeah, cool, okay. So I'm just gonna show you on the code pen. Okay. So we have, is everyone clear with tooltips? Basically create a div. We make the position absolute, and what we're doing is we're changing the text value, similar to what you would do in your homework. And you're updating the position. In our homework, it appears in the same spot, but you can change the position as well. And then you're just making the opacity of the tooltip not 0. And then when you are not selecting data or hovering over data, and you don't need your tooltip anymore, you change it to 0. We can look at that. So yeah, just what we do. But if no one has any questions about the tooltip,
Yeah, on that question, do you have a second? I don't know. Can you introduce?
okay, yeah, definitely. So tooltip is just, what we're doing is that we have a div somewhere in our HTML here that we've just determined, we give it an ID of tooltip. It doesn't have any information in it yet, and in the CSS it should be hidden or have an initial opacity of 0. We're just not showing it.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, the tooltip doesn't have any content, so you don't need to set it at 0 initially.
Yeah.
But it won't show anyways.
So it's tucked away in there. And then if you remember the events, our mouse over and mouse out events, what we're doing is we're calling this state tooltip render. And over our markers, as well as the states. So let's look at the circles for now.
You just need to scroll down. They are the last 2 edits.
Yeah, here they are. Okay, so on mouse sleeve, we're taking that tooltip with a transition, we're putting opacity to 0. And all of this code is in that link as well. So if you want to look at it more in detail. Does that make sense? Should we open it up to questions that you guys are struggling with right now?
I'm unclear about when things are called. I mean, obviously we didn't build the hierarchy of it, but there's the like update plot and update data sort of things. I want to understand better the intent behind that.
So,
So think of it like every time the slider, so basically every time the slider changes something in the map, so basically does our map have two dips?
yes, it
So
does.
the two dips in our map, the date in our map plus our scatter plot updates. But if one of our drop down changes, only the scatter plot updates. Does that make sense? You have to think of it like initially when you first load the entire visualization, what should happen is a map should be created. So across the time, the map, the shape of the countries, well, I mean, surely across a long period of time, the countries change, but just let's say we just draw all the map out at first. Then I don't know if you have any question, but we basically randomly select a year and load the data for that year into our map, as well as we have the scatter plot. We randomly select two attributes or like hardcode two attributes initially. We show a scatter plot for those. After that, you have to think about what things can change, like what actions can lead to change in something visually. First is the slider. You can change the year. So when slider updates, you have to update the map. Like, even though the countries on the map might not change, when you hover on the countries, the data might change. So you have to first update that. Second, your scatter plot will definitely update because according to the year, the statistics for each country change. So next you have to update your scatter plot every time you slider moves. Now the second interaction, like the second interactive part which we have here is our drop downs. You can select X, Y axis and the size of your scatter plot object, right? So in all three of these cases, the only thing that needs to update is scatter plot. So the events which handle drop down change only need to worry about updating the scatter plot. They don't have to bother with the map at all. So that's your second interaction. One more interaction we have is clicking on the countries.
Yes.
Yes. So when you click on the country, the only thing you need to worry about is whatever country you clicked on should be highlighted in scatter plot. We don't have to change the data here. All we have to do is just highlight and unhighlight them. So potentially you should not be you shouldn't be calling the entire update plot event because you're not redrawing the plot. You're just highlighting a country according to some value. So you can, of course, you can always redraw it. Like this example is small enough that you won't slow anything down. But a good practice is if your objective is just to highlight a point in the scatter plot, don't redraw the scatter plot, just highlight that point. Use events to do that.
It also grays out the rest of the circles that aren't related to that region, right?
It's just a change in color. You don't technically need to re-render. Like you don't. So basically, your update function for scatter plots or the gap plot will calculate all the X, Y positions again. You'll regenerate the axis, but you don't need to do that every time you gray everything out. All you need to do is smartly design some classes and add and remove the classes. That's it.
You can think of it as, so you have these selections. I'm assuming that your scatter plot has classes, so you can use that filter, and you can filter on data that is already there. So if you select a country in your map, you can think of it as you're selecting your dots in your scatter plot, and you can filter all of them that are not that country and do something with it, and you can filter the one that is that country, if that makes sense, and then do something different with that one.
Any more questions?
So like in the code, sometimes you have left that equals this. I don't know what
Sorry?
that's supposed to. Oh, so in the code. So in the code, there is a line saying let that equals this. So I don't know the
Yes.
for that.
That's, yeah. Do we have one for you? Yeah. So we have defined everything as classes, right? So we have a class called GapPlot. It has a constructor which describes some methods and this constructor defines some field variables like class variables, and it also defines certain functions. The way to access these functions is you have to do this dot this function in. Now, in let's say this is our update code, and in our update code we have a d3 dot select all something something. We have associated the data. We are doing everything. Now, at one point, what we are doing is we are doing dot attribute or something similar height, and this height now is of the value for this height is a function with a d, and if you use this syntax of function d syntax instead of using arrow syntax, you cannot access this dot inside the function, because when you use a function keyword, JavaScript redefines the this. So inside this function space, the value of this keyword becomes this whatever this keyword whatever you appended here. So if you are doing like a select all circle, inside this function the value of this keyword would be the circle object, not this class GapPlot. So that's the reason on the top here we say let that equals this. So in case you want to use GapPlot instance inside this, you can just put that dot function in, because you use value to this. Again, if you use an arrow function syntax, you don't have to worry about it. Inside an arrow function, so instead of doing this, if you said d equals and use this syntax, you can directly use this as GapPlot. But this has disadvantages that you cannot access the circle inside this. So there are both ways, and there are times when you use either one or the other.
So I'm still a little bit lost on the plot data. Should we be making, or when you did this, did you do the plot data object within the gap plot constructor?
Just let me take a look at the question.
Because like, I feel like I got my stuff to work, but it's like a complete bastardization of like what I'm actually supposed to do. So I can get stuff to like move around, but I know, and it's plotted, but I know it's not right.
So so your question about using plot data, so technically you should just create like in the beginning so whatever happens, like years might change, like your drop downs might change, but your country data is always going to be the same. Your base data would always be a list of countries with some like the name of the country, the region of the country. Your data shouldn't change across map and your scatter plot, right? So technically you should be creating your plot data object once. You should create an array of plot data object once and then use that constantly. You don't have to create plot data in GapPlot constructor once and a map constructor once. That's not a good practice.
So similar to what we did with the function of we're using that map data to make the actual map and the markers, and we had two separate functions for that. You can kind of think of it in that way, that you have this array of objects that you've created. You've mapped through all of your data. We did that in the above after we loaded our data. And then we have two separate functions that are doing different things. They're rendering different things, but they're still using the same data. So you can just pass those as parameters to whatever function or constructor that you have, and you don't have to redo it for each constructor, if that makes sense. Just like I didn't want to make a projection twice. So I made a projection where I mapped the data, and then I passed those both as parameters to the different functions. And the data is not changing, it's just doing different things in the functions, if that makes sense. So I can use my draw markers function to do the green dots, and I can use the the map data to draw the actual map, but it's the same data for both. I'm just using different things from it.
So let's say we have our map data.
Yeah.
Defined in the map class that we want to be able to use in the plot class.
Yeah.
Right? We just define that as like this equals.
Can you repeat?
So if we created our data in the map class by mapping it, right?
Right, sure.
Yeah. What's the best way to pass that from the map class to the plot class?
Okay, so basically you
Right,
have
you
this
just end up calling map dot.
two
our data.
working parts, right?
Yeah.
This is your map, this is your scatter plot. So you're saying you created your data in this section, now you want to pass it here.
Yes.
What's a better way is to to create your objects in this outer section so that you can pass the same object to both the classes.
So the script.js, is that what you're talking about?
You can, yeah, I mean, we don't restrict, you can use script.js if you want, sure, like, yeah, that's the most logical place here. Because what you want to do is combine your data, like you want to take your individual statistical data plus the data about the regions, about the data which maps countries to their continents. You have to combine it here and then pass it here and here, so both scatter plot and the map get same copy of the data, so that you don't have to worry about the order being changed or anything else, and you don't have to do twice the work. Of course, like if you see the map.js has a class called country data and the scatterplot has a class called plot data.
Yeah, that's really.
Those are the two classes for their individual use. Like country data class is designed so that you can easily create the map, and plot data class is created here so that you can easily create the scatterplot. But you don't like this. But the combining of your data sets, the combining of all your multiple CSV files, you can do it once in the top. You don't have to do it inside here and inside here separately.
So if you think of it's like a right, so yeah, let's go back to our central point. So I wonder if it'd be good if we could do like a show and tell where we just like have people talk through the code where they're at right now. And then everyone else could be like, oh, I'm there too. I have no idea what to do. You know what I mean? It's like a big code review, which would be, I don't know, because instead of like going, anyway, we'll move forward here and then we'll translate it to everyone else. Okay, so we're at central point. We have unity box, map, gap plot. It's like we're trying to leave a lot so people we have a bunch of ideas, but then we're not pieces that we have to put together. So this is Wait, the okay, well, it's not. Okay, so it isn't touch screen. Okay, yes. Like these are all oh, okay, so I think it is.